Yes, you're listening to 89.1 FM WNYU or WNYU.org, Against the Vile Grain. I have here on the phone with me in North Dakota's Brandon Wald of Support Unit, Mono Wolf, and Sword of Kalis, and owner of Black Ring Rituals Records, and so much more. Thank you so much for coming on the show with me today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be on.
Sweet, let's dive right into it. I find it very impressive, and I know a lot of others do too, that Fargo has such a prevalent underground scene. Labels like Black Ring Rituals and Dough Girl Tapes are putting out really great content from local experimental artists and others from around the country. I mean, maybe I'm ignorant as to what's going on elsewhere, but I feel like Fargo, a city of less than 125,000 people, is pumping out more noise hits than cities like 5 times its size. Do you have any guesses as to why that might be?
Well, Fargo's had an underground scene. It goes back to the 80s, at least with punk and metal, but we've had noise in the city since 1992, I think, with Unconditional Loathing, and we've always had noise in the city since. We've had a lot of artists, like Edwin Manchester and stuff, carrying the flag just for decades. Really in the past decade, though, it's kind of taken off. We have, 20 or 30 projects in the metro area. Once I started putting together more noise-exclusive shows, it started getting bigger, and I think the radio show I have helps. We have a very queer scene, so I think it's a safe refuge for a lot of trans and queer people, because, it's a fairly conservative city, and we don't tolerate nonsense at our shows, so I don't know, and maybe people are just tired of going to hardcore shows. I don't know.
Right. That's really great. Do you feel like Fargo's conservative nature has ever affected the scene's ability to organize?
No. Fargo's a more liberal city compared to the rest of the state, although there are a lot of conservatives. And the liberals aren't very with it either. But we have 3 university campuses, but they have no clue what's going on. They don't even line up with our reality. It's like a totally different world. They're not even on the radar. And we're lucky we have venues like the Red Raven and Seagrave that are super supportive of what we're doing. So we don't really run into a lot of trouble.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
And you said you ran the Black Ring Rituals radio show for the past 6 years. Have you ever gotten any upset or confused callers?
Yes, I have. People have called thinking the radio's broken. That probably happens. That probably happens a few times a year. I had a guy call from the Taco Bell drive-thru one time, just baked out of his mind. And he was totally into it. He had no idea what was going on, but I think I was tripping him out.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Do you ever get any weird looks for wearing noise tees? I know you got a genocide organ tee.
Not really. I got stopped by a state senator one time outside of the grocery store, and he kind of was like, "What is that?" And I was like, I told him what it was, and he was like, "I'm gonna go Google that." No, you're not.
Oh, I hope he did, and I hope
he did.
Yeah. And I guess addressing the pandemic in the room, how has coronavirus affected your ability to create and share and curate music? Has the local scene been affected?
Yeah, this has been tough for everyone. Fargo's, it's not like New York, and I hope all your listeners are safe, but I don't know, we have around 200 in the city as of today. And all of our shows are postponed through the end of May. For me, just being stuck at home has been good and bad. I've been able to spend a lot of time putting together cassettes and 8-tracks and all the other things I do. But I've been doing my radio show for the past 3 weeks because I'm too paranoid to go into the station and stuff.
Right. Well, if you had one of those billionaire survival bunkers for the survivalist billionaires have in the Black Hills of South Dakota, What would you do with it?
I guess I get into a ham radio or something.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Eat MRAs. Yeah.
Yeah. You excel at pressing releases on what a lot of people consider dead mediums, to the point where it really becomes a piece of art in of itself. I'm thinking of the recent Sport Unit single that you put out, Obsolete Tactics, that you pressed on hit clips and you released with customized hit clip players. So I was very curious, like, how in the hell you're able to press Harsh Noise Wall on a medium, most well known for being like the McDonald's Happy Meals toys that played like the first minute of like a Britney Spears tracks in like 2003.
Yeah, well, the hit clip started as a joke. I thought it would be funny if someone ever released on it. I didn't think it was even possible, but I did a lot of research and I found they made recordable hit clips in the early 2000s, the Yahoo branded hit clips. So I started buying them on eBay, which was not cheap. They're around $18 on eBay. And after a while, I figured I had a good minimum run for a weird little art piece. I think I did like 7. I painted the players not well, and it only holds like 2 minutes of music, but it was fun.
Yeah, that's cool. And I mean, at this point, cassette is just like a standard for noise. I mean, it has been for a long time. I'm pretty interested in Ouroboros Ltd, your 8-track label, and all your releases on minidisc. Those mediums, to my knowledge, haven't had like much of a history in the noise scene. So why choose to press music on them? And in general, like, what's the motivation to pressing on more obscure formats?
I don't know. I'm always trying to push the limits and expand into weirder and weirder things, weirder formats. I'm interested in obsolete technology. I guess that bleeds into my label. 8-tracks, there was a fairly prolific noise label called 8-track Stereo by that was run by Waves Crashing Piano Chords guy, and I have a few of his releases, but I've had them for years. I didn't have a way to play them, so they were just sitting on my shelf. Eventually, I found an 8-track recorder at a thrift store, and I bought it immediately, and I thought, well, if he can do this, why can't I? So I found a record store in Kansas City willing to buy them or sell them to me in bulk for pretty cheap, and I bought a big box, and I've got one release out now, and I've got a batch in the works. And they're a lot of work. 8-tracks, you have to repair the splice, you have to repair the foam padding, or replace it, and sometimes you have to fix the tension, so you got to like open up all the 8-tracks and clean them out and fix them, and I found dead spiders, and I've had to wash them out. And
that's really cool. I love that. You also run Invocation Films, which is a VHS subdivision of Blackwing Rituals Records, which presses VHSs of, quote, esoteric interest. So, pray tell, what is in said category of esoteric interest?
Well, right now it's music videos and live footage from Noise and Power Electronics Acts. But the goal is to expand into video art and experimental films. I'm just waiting on the right releases, I guess.
And do you have like a collection, a VHS collection?
Yeah, I have a VHS collection. I also have a Laserdisc collection.
Whoa, that's sweet. Can you tell me some of your favorite pieces in those collections?
Yeah, I have a VHS tape called UFOs Are Real, which is like a weird UFO documentary from the 90s. Pink Flamingos. Free as Dead is a film by Romain Perrault of Vomir. That's pretty cool. I've got some adult films on Laserdisc and stuff that I kind of like.
Wow. Yeah, you wouldn't. Of course, they would have adult films on Laserdisc.
Yeah, well,
it's pretty funny. Yeah, I'd like to talk now a little bit about your music and your ideas behind your music. So, Support Unit, which is your Harsh Noise Wall project. Those releases are usually centered around geopolitical conflicts and left-wing militant groups. You know, and those groups range from Himalayan Maoist organizations to Spanish anarcho-syndicalists to Baudelaire revolutionaries. Most support unit pieces will feature like a segment of a news program, a speech, or chants, which are then interrupted or then like maybe complemented by like violent but meditative wall noise. Why make like foreign and domestic militant organization a focus of your music?
I've always had an interest in geography, history, and geopolitics. I guess my main intention is to use the meditative and attention-focusing character of wall noise to sort of focus the listener's mind on the thematic subject that I'm presenting, with maybe the hope they'll maybe research what I'm showcasing while they're listening to it. Maybe they'll Wikipedia it or look up news articles or something while they're listening to it and read it and research it. It maybe broaden their understanding of conflicts and how they shape the world we live in, and maybe broaden their mind about revolutionary actions and possibilities of changing things if you have work and willpower and strategy. A lot of times I'll read a book and be really inspired by the time I'm done that I'll rush out and I'll record an album about it. I did that with the revolutionary abolitionist movement, with Armed Conflict. That's a 12-hour album I put out. I was reading the biography of Buenaventura Durruti, and so when I was done with that, I was re-releasing it as a CD box. I threw the "A New World in Our Hearts" quote on the back. Maybe spur people into thinking and reading, and hopefully they make their own minds about things. But
yeah, that's really cool. And where do you find a lot of the photos for the album covers? Because a lot of them are pretty stark.
I definitely scour the internet, find pictures on blogs or YouTube slideshows or news articles. I mean, I'm not. Obviously I'm not a war journalist, so I can't take them myself, but...
that's interesting. Like, have you ever considered, like, addressing local, like, North Dakota politics and music, say, like, something like the oil boom and, like, the influx of problems that's caused?
My power electronics project, Monowolf, which is on hiatus now, but we did a split with BS Market, where we focused on the Dakota Access Pipelines, which was happening right around the time that split came out. The other member of Monowolf was a member of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, so we were pretty focused on the Dakota Access Pipeline stuff. Otherwise, I haven't really touched a lot of local politics. It's something I'll definitely be pursuing in the future, because there's been a lot of messed up things going on. That's for sure.
Yeah. You talked about how, one of the reasons you do, like, wall noise is that you hope in that time, like, in that, meditative sort of state, people kind of think about the topic of the album, and maybe they go and research it. And Clive Henry once said in a piece of his that Harsh Noise Wall is founded more on an idea than a sound. So, harsh noise wall sets might involve altering someone's perception of time, which is then violently interrupted when the track ends with, like, a sudden cut. Henry suggests that this induces a sort of hypnotic and spiritual experience, which is then violently and abruptly ended. Do you feel that support unit is more centered around an idea or an overwhelming quality of void noise centered around a theme than it is music? Or does the DoD death metal pedal simply go burr?
Well, the DoD death metal pedal definitely does go burr. But, H&W is totally a meditative mind focuser. If I put on wall noise and I'm open a book, I can't even look away from the pages until the wall stops it. And then when the wall stops, it, like, snaps you out of this trance. So support unit is definitely, it's definitely an all-encompassing sort of an idea of the wall and the themes.
Yeah. Now going back to Monowolf and your power electronics project, a classic political tactic used by a lot of bands and industrial has been the curation of objectionable speeches and interviews, which then have like their intent altered by sinister bass drones, screeching feedback, screams, and the like. Can you tell me about some of the things you've sampled so as to satirize or critique them in your Monowolf releases, and then maybe some things you sampled that you feel are righteous but address something similarly sinister?
Well, yeah, Monowolf was always about exploring control and domination and stuff. It was definitely, it's an anarchist project. We did an album satirizing the right-wing militia group Oath Keepers. There was an album about the Master Path cult, which was a cult that started in Fargo in the late 80s. And there was like a series of high-profile deprogrammings, and the guy was ran out of town and resurfaced a couple years later. And it's really interesting. We made albums with his face on it, or we made patches. I'm sorry, we made patches with his face on it and gave them to people. And we did an album about North Korea, which was a double cassette where we on one cassette was the Power Electronics, and on the other cassette it was just filled with North Korean military anthems. All of our stuff was about control and cults and domination, whether it be authoritarian left or crazy right-wingers or religious control. That's sort of where we were going.
Yeah, another traditional power electronics tactic is in performance, harnessing that kind of control that you're also seeking to like satirize or critique, and kind of flipping it on your head. So something, it might be like using tactics of intimidation or even like self-destruction through the noise. So in your Star Trek themed power electronics project, sort of Kalis, you dress up like a Klingon and swing around a batleth. And a batleth is like a double-sided scimitar from like the series. Can you tell me why you chose to make a power electronics project centered around Star Trek and like what those performances are like?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Trekkie. I love Star Trek. I made a joke about if Klingons made noise, it'd be power electronics, and then I went down the rabbit hole and I just kept doing it. And I went out and I spent like a couple $100 on Klingon cosplay outfit and bought a batleth, and I made a few albums, played a few fests. It takes over an hour to get into costume and stuff.
Nice.
So I'm live. I'm dressed like a Klingon. It looks good. My partner does the makeup. And I'm swinging around a batleth. I push the batleth into people. I'm yelling in their faces. I'm trying to get them to fight me. Nice. I try to take on the entire persona of a Klingon. Because in that moment, in that space, I am a Klingon, and I want the audience to be afraid because Klingons are scary.
Yeah. That's sweet. What has audience reaction been like?
People are pretty into it. You'll see people who are uncomfortable and they step away, and that's fine. And then you see people who are really into it and they want to come at me, and that's what I want. Bring it on, come at me.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. That's about all we have time for. But I really appreciate you coming here and talking about all of this. And,
yeah, thanks for having me on.
For sure. Brandon Wald of Support Unit, Monowolf, and Sword of Kalis, and owner of Black Ring Rituals Records.